Let's all rise for the jury, please. Please be seated.
Resume your examination, please.
Leanna, when we left off, we were talking about the point in time when you'd already been transported back over to Cobb Police Headquarters, and we talked a little bit about you being in the waiting area or in a lobby area.
It's in more of an office area.
Kind of an office area. And I know you've expressed that it starts to become sort of hazy and confusing at that point. But to the best of your recollection, just tell us what you remember about who you interacted with and kind of what the dynamic was, what was going on at that point in time.
I know that while I was sitting in the chair in the kind of office area, there were several people that would walk by me. I was pretty much, I've said this before, it didn't feel real to me. It didn't feel like it was happening. I felt like I was in a dream. And so during that time, I kept going back and forth between praying, please God, don't let this be true. Just let me wake up. Just don't let this be true. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. And I knew at some point I was going to get to see Ross. And I knew I needed to be strong for him. I knew that he was never going to forgive himself. I knew that this was something that wasn't done purposefully.
Objection, Judge. Commenting on intent.
Sustained.
You can continue on sort of about what was going on and who you encountered.
Sitting in a chair, a gentleman walked past me. I can remember him offering me a trash can. I think he thought that I was feeling sick, maybe by some of my body language, maybe. I remember that. I stopped, somebody and asked if I could go to the restroom. And they allowed me to go to the restroom. I stopped someone and I asked, I was like, I was trying to understand, and I asked, I said, where is my son? Where is my son?
Object to hearsay at this point, Judge, about what she's saying. It's an out-of-court statement. She is on direct. Also, what anybody else would say to her is also hearsay at this point.
Did you know where your son was at the time?
No.
Did you try to find out?
Yes.
And who were you trying to find out from?
The first person I asked, he didn't have an answer for me. I think it was God speak to the detective.
While you were sitting out there in that sort of waiting area, were you ever able to get any explanation about where your son was?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. While you were sitting out in the waiting area, or in the office that you described, were you ever able to get any information or answer about where your son was?
Not at that point. No.
Okay. Have you got any idea how long you were in that office or sort of waiting area before you had a chance to talk to the detectives?
I have no idea.
All right. And did any of the detectives come and check on you?
They would come and say, it's going to be a few minutes. They moved me into a room.
Okay.
And said said that, you know, they're going to come talk to you. And then left me in the room by myself.
All right. During that time period, did they ever put handcuffs on you?
No.
All right. Did they ever tell you you were under arrest?
No.
Were you in a closed room? Do you know if the door was locked?
I never tried to open it. I don't remember trying to open it.
Okay.
I can't remember.
All right. And you're telling us you're really not even sure how long you were in there?
I don't know.
All right. Okay. At any time while you were in that office area waiting, did Detective Stoddard come in to check on you or talk to you?
Yes, he came in.
Okay. And do you recall if you made any of those similar inquiries you were telling us about where your son was?
Not at that time.
Okay. All right. Obviously, you were interviewed. Correct?
Yes.
And have you had a chance to see that interview?
I have seen it.
Okay.
I've reviewed the transcript, but it's parts of it I remember. A lot of it's very hazy.
A lot of the interview was hazy, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. And which detective interviewed you?
Detective Stoddard, and there was another gentleman with them.
Okay. Was it in the same room that you've been describing, the same sort of office?
Well, they moved me from the office space area where I was just sitting in a chair in the middle of a room. Kind of, the way I remember it, it was kind of almost like cubicles.
Mm-hmm.
They moved me from there into a room alone.
Okay.
And so it was just a table and me and a couple of chairs.
All right. And do you have any recollection of when you got into that room? Do you have any recollection of what happened? Did they do anything with your stuff?
They did go through my purse, search my wallet.
Okay. Do you even have any recollection whether they asked or not?
They asked me if my purse had been looked at,
Okay.
and I said no.
All right.
And then they moved through it.
Do you have any recollection whether or not they read you Miranda rights?
No, they did not.
Did not. Okay. All right. You've described sort of the emotional component kind of what you were going through. You've described it as floating, dream, not sure it was real or whatnot. Could you describe sort of that emotional component that was going on in your mind while you were being interviewed by Detective Stoddard?
It was the whole night was the same. I mean, in weeks following, it just didn't feel real. It just felt like I was going to wake up. This is a nightmare. I've had very vivid dreams before, where they feel so real, and you wake up and you think, oh, thank God that was a dream. Yeah. And I just kept thinking, this isn't real. I felt the floating aspect. It was almost like an out-of-body experience. I don't know how to explain it, other than it was like I was going out of my mind. Like I was out of my mind. My body was there, but it didn't feel like I was all there. I was still operating on a very base type thing. Logic. Answer the questions. I think I thought, just let me answer the questions and I can go home and it'll be okay. This is not happening. Just let me get through this.
you don't need to tell us any words that you said or any statements that you made. But did you have an opportunity to give your opinion to the police about what you thought could have happened?
I did.
Did you tell that to Detective Stoddard?
I did.
Do you have any sense of time, how long you were in there speaking with those detectives while you were being interviewed?
I really don't.
Do you have any recollection that you were left alone for some period of time after they interviewed you?
I remember it, but I remember it because I reviewed the interview.
Did you had mentioned a couple of times that you had made a request to see your husband, or at least you asked where your husband was?
Yes.
Did they let you see your husband?
I'm sorry?
Did they let you see your husband?
Yes, they did.
All right. I want you to kind of tell us sort of how that happened, and to the best of your recollection, what transpired when you were allowed to see Ross.
You want to know how they let me see Ross?
Take us from your first memory of how you came to be meeting with him and what happened in that room between the two of you.
I knew that I needed to be with him. I felt a very strong sense that I needed to be with my husband. So I did ask to see him. Like I said, I don't know how long it was before they finished my interview, and they said, well, we're going to see about getting y'all together. So we'll be back. And they left me. And then I think the next time the door opened, it was Ross.
Okay. Well, let me stop you there. Do you have any recollection of whether or not you were told that you were going to be recorded while you met with your husband?
I was not told.
All right. Tell us what happened.
This is very similar to the interview situation. There are some things that stick out, some things that I remember. He just walked into the room, and I knew I needed to support him. I knew I needed to be strong for him. That was my primary thoughts going into it the whole time that I'm waiting. You referenced the phone call. That was part of the phone call that I took in the interview room. Ross's parents asking me to be strong for him, and that we need each other to get through this. And so I tried to, the best I could, being in the state of mind that I was in, to be supportive and just kind of be the rock in that room.
Leanna, we've seen that recording during this trial. Have you had a chance to see it? Okay. Do you have a recollection that you were not crying during the encounter with your husband?
Right.
Do you remember that?
I don't remember if I cried or not.
Okay.
I can remember watching it, watching the interaction, and it was the same situation as it did with previously. I did not recognize who that was myself. I did not know that you could react in the way that I reacted. I didn't. It was like somebody else took over my body for me while I was outside of my mind trying to make sense of what was happening. It was like somebody else took over and just got me through each step of the way. I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize my voice, my mannerisms. Everything was foreign when I went back and watched that.
Well, we can see Leanna on the outside. Do you have any recollection of what was going on with Leanna on the inside during that encounter with your husband?
It was the same, just going back and forth between this isn't happening, this can't be real, this isn't right, this is just be strong. I mean, it was a range of things just all flooding me, at one time.
Leanna, we saw during the showing of that video, sort of your husband's emotions and what happened when he saw you, came together in that room. I want you to tell the jury about that. I want them to hear from you what you observed face to face, chest to chest with your husband.
It was very difficult to see him like that. That's not a side of Ross that I've seen very often, to see him that broken and that just beside himself. I can't even, having to watch it on a video, I can't even deal with that because it's just raw. It was just raw.
Had you ever seen your husband cry out like that before?
No.
We weren't in that room. You were. Okay. Did he have tears streaming down his face? Was he crying?
He was crying enough that he asked me for a tissue. His shirt, I remember his shirt being wet. I remember him saying, I didn't have a tissue, so I said, I'll just wipe it on my shirt.
Been married to him for some time. Is that the first and only time you've seen him react like that?
That much? Absolutely.
Y'all were talking. Did he tell you that did you learn that he had been charged?
Yes.
And again, we've seen the recording already, and among the many things that were said during that recording, do you recall, as y'all were sitting face to face, you saying something or making an inquiry to the effect of, did you say too much?
I did.
Okay. Do you have any recollection of saying that?
I do. It's one of the things that stands out more. There's, like I said, there's some things that stand out. There's some things that don't. I know how Ross responds to people, especially people that he doesn't know. He talks a lot, even if he doesn't have anything to say. And I couldn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand why he was being charged. I didn't understand the actions that were being taken. And the only thing that I could think in my head was, what did you say? And so those words came out.
I'm not going to go into a lot of that conversation because obviously the jury has seen it, but I want to ask you about one other thing that I made a note of at the end of the, kind of toward the end of the conversation. Do you remember Ross sort of chatting up Detective Stoddard? Okay. Did that stick out to you?
It did.
Why?
As soon as the words were out of his mouth, I thought, Why are you even asking that question? That is so inappropriate for this moment.
What question?
I think he asked him, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been in law enforcement? And as soon as those words fell out of his mouth, I thought, I don't even, why are you saying that? These people they're not, this is not a chatty situation. It's, we need to do what they tell us to do, and we need to move forward. That was the thought. The thought that crossed my mind was that's typical. That's very typical Ross.
Was that or was that not in keeping with the way he ran off at the mouth?
Yes, it is.
I want to talk about one thing that came up that night with Detective Stoddard. Do you have any recollection at all of conveying to either Detective Stoddard or any of the law enforcement officers that having your child left in his car in a car was a fear of yours?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you recall who you told that to?
I think I said it in both of my interviews. The first one with the treehouse, and then the second one.
Okay. Well, let me start by asking this: was that a fear of yours?
Yes.
Next, did you have some basis of knowledge to even know about such a thing happening?
It was something that you hear about on the news. A public service announcement may pop up on Facebook talking about the dangers of it. It had been the center of a few television shows. The storyline wrapping around, that happening to somebody on the show. These were either while I was pregnant with Cooper or before. And it was fear. I didn't.
Leanna, did you believe it could really happen to you though?
No, I mean, I didn't. It wasn't like, it was one of those irrational fears. Everybody has most people have some kind of irrational fears for no reason. Fear of heights, fear of water. I didn't have a reason to fear this. Nothing had ever happened to make me fear this. This had never happened to anybody that I knew personally. It had never happened before. But it was just a fear.
Is it something that you and Ross had actually talked about?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any recollection of ever sharing with Ross any news account or public service announcement or anything like that? Do you know if you ever shared anything with him?
The only thing that I can remember in my own memory is seeing it was morning news.
Okay.
And it was basically a public service announcement. And it was just recounting some things that had happened in previous years and the dangers associated with them.
If there were information that perhaps you had shared things with him, articles with him in the past, in previous years, is that possible and you just don't remember it?
It's possible.
And do you have any basis of knowledge to know whether or not Ross thought it could ever happen to him?
Objection, speculation, and hearsay.
Assistant.
How long did they keep you at the police station that night, Leanna?
I really don't have gotten home at 9 that night. I really don't know.
Do you even know how you got home?
One of the daycare teachers that was in the lobby stayed until I was let go, and she drove me home.
What did you do when you got home?
I didn't want to go in my home. It was like I knew that if I went through the door, that it would be real. And I didn't want it to be real. So I sat down on the sidewalk outside and just sat there, and I said, I don't want to go inside. And we finally went inside, and I walked back through the living room and through the kitchen, through the hallway, and back to Cooper's room, and I just got in his bed and I just cried. I finally was able to cry.
And were any of your friends there with you? Were you able to call anybody to come be with you that night?
Azure from the daycare was with me. I was able to call a couple of friends over from town. They came over. I think I had 2 friends over from the Marietta area, and then my family was on the way, and they didn't get there until midnight or later.
Were you notified by Cobb Police that you were a suspect?
No.
You subsequently learned that you were a suspect.
Yes.
Was your computer seized?
Yes.
Tell these folks if there was anything precious to you on that computer.
All of my pictures on my board. All the videos. Everything that there were a few pictures still on my phone, but most of them have been dumped onto the computer.
Did you ask anybody to try to get those pictures back for you?
I did.
Who'd you ask?
Asked you.
Did you end up having to have an attorney yourself in this matter?
I did.
Okay. Are you aware if the images on your computer, if they were ever produced to your attorney?
They were given him on a disc. I was never able to get the pictures myself. I didn't have anything to dump them onto. I didn't have a computer to put them on.
Who had your computer?
Cobb County Police Department.
I want to go over real quickly, just a couple of things about Cooper's funeral. Can you tell us when his funeral was?
It was on a Saturday, not the immediate Saturday following, but the Saturday after that. I want to say it was June 28th. I had lots of friends and family helping me. One of the things that they requested was pictures. They wanted to have pictures of Cooper out in the lobby area, and of course they needed something for the piece of paper that they made for it, the program. And that was when I realized I didn't have access to my pictures, and requested my pictures. Did not get my pictures at that time. What we ended up doing was basically texting family and friends if anybody had any pictures of Cooper, if they had it posted to me on Facebook or anything like that, that they would please send them to me so I could get them to the right person.
Because you were apparently a suspect at the time, I want to ask you about some statements that you made that became public, and the funeral was public, wasn't it? have any recollection of yourself speaking at the funeral?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. I believe anything that she says, an out-of-court statement, that would be hearsay at this point on direct. Anything she said is going to be hearsay completely.
They're her statements, and she's here to be cross-examined on her statements.
And Judge, that may be admissible on cross-examination, but it's an out-of-court statement she made separately. It's not admissible on direct.
It would go to show her state of mind and intent at the time.
And that's weeks after the incident, Judge.
I sustain the objection.
Did Ross, was he allowed to
Objection, relevance, may we approach?
Let's talk about the search warrant that was executed on your, at your home on June the 30th. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. Tell us about that. Who was at your home?
So if it was June the 30th, that would have been after the funeral. At that time, things had started coming out in the media. A lot of things were being said about me, some of which were completely false or taken out of context. And we were, family and friends were, texting us and calling us and asking us about what's going on. People are saying this. Media was coming to the door, knocking on the door. In one situation, almost walking right in. And they would set up their cameras right outside my door and just point them in the direction to see me coming and going. We had a lot of people knock on the door at that point. At that time, it was at night, and we did have somebody knock on the door. My mom went to the door, and it was just me and my mother there. And somebody knocked on the door. She looked through the peephole, and she saw a lanyard around their neck and assumed that they were media. So we decided not to open the door at that time. We did look outside, and we saw a police car outside, a marked police car. And at that time, we heard them kind of start knocking on neighbors' doors, wanting to know where we were. And at that time, I opened the door. And I said, "I'm sorry, we thought that you were with the media. Can I help you?" And he said, we're here to search your home. And my just immediate response was, "Well, that's already been done." And his response to me was basically, "Well, we have a warrant, so we're coming in anyway." And I wasn't trying to keep him from coming in. I didn't understand if it had been searched before, how it would need to be searched again. And I said, "Well, that's fine. Come on in."
How did they treat you?
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
What did they do?
They came in the door, handed me the search warrant so that I could see what they were looking for. they had us sit down on the couch, basically told us not to move, that we weren't allowed to follow them around or anything like that. I had a friend that was on her way to my home, and she had gotten there right after they arrived. And I told whoever was there, I said, I have a friend that's just got here, or she's going to be here in a few minutes. And he said, well, she's not coming in. If she comes in, then we'll have to call more police. So she stayed out in her car and waited.
What was the encounter like? What did they have you do? Did they explain to you what was going on?
It was, at that point, I had already been through so much. I lost my son. I lost my husband. I buried my son. I came back. I mean, and then they're coming into my home to search my home again, and they're not being very nice. They're not being, they weren't absolutely right out ugly, but it was very stern interaction. Just basically, we're here, we're going to do this, whether you like it or not. It was scary. It was not anything I've ever experienced before. I've never had any experience with law enforcement other than getting a speeding ticket or something of that nature. I mean, I've never had my car searched, never had my home searched. This was all very, very scary to me.
And it was just you and your mom?
It's me and my mother.
And how many officers came in?
Objection to relevance, Judge. As far as how many officers showed up to do the search warrant.
Did they tell you while they were there?
They handed me the search warrant, and I believe that it actually stated the reasons why they were there. I think they said it out loud too, but I can't remember for sure.
Do you recall if they took any photographs?
They did.
Where did they take photographs?
In various locations. I know that they took photographs of the master bathroom. That was stated on the warrant that they were looking for light bulbs blown. They also stated in the warrant was financial documentation, stuff like that. I had a bag of things that we were preparing to shred, and I handed him the bag and any other mail or anything that we had around. We had a safe box, a fire safe box that we kept birth certificate, wedding license, passport, social security card, stuff like that in. They asked me for the key to that. I gave them the key, and they went inside that. I'm assuming taking pictures the whole time of different documents. But I was sitting on the couch after I went, because they did allow me to come get the key for them for the safe box. And so I went and got the key, gave it to them, went and sat back down. There was a gentleman going through the bag of stuff that we prepared to shred, and he was calling another guy back in to take pictures here and there.
And do you have any recollection of whether or not they were asking you any questions during this process?
They would ask me where things were,
Okay.
like if they were looking for something specific.
Okay.
We didn't keep a lot of financial documents, and a lot of our stuff was done digitally.
Okay.
So whatever we had, I said, this is some mail that we've received. I don't have anything anywhere else that I'm aware of. This is the only thing that I've got in paper document form.
All right, so I want to ask you specifically, you did say something about the bathroom. It's 236. For the record, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 235 and 236. You know what that is, don't you?
That's our master bathroom.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of whether or not they went in there to take those pictures? In the bathroom?
Yes.
Okay. And did you actually see something on the warrant about that?
Yes. To the best of my knowledge. That's my recollection.
And we see pretty clearly in 236, this is a bathroom type vanity.
Mm-hmm.
And what appears to be 3 bulbs illuminated and 3 bulbs out.
Yes.
Okay. Is that your recollection of what the vanity lights looked like when they came in to execute that search warrant?
There were bulbs out. I wouldn't have remembered unless you showed me the picture how many.
Okay. That's 2 through 6. In fact, y'all needed some bulbs.
Yes, sir.
Did you and Ross during the course of your marriage have an opportunity to take any vacations or trips?
We did. We had just kind of gotten to the point in our marriage financially where taking some trips were an option. It was something that we wanted to do, and we wanted to set aside money to do those things. So we took a trip in October of 2013 to the Dominican Republic, and we had gone to Fort Walton Beach Memorial Day weekend of 2014. And we would visit. We had a friend that we would visit from time to time in Mississippi. I don't know if you would consider that a vacation or not. I mean, to us it was.
Right. We've heard some testimony during the course of the trial.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point to the defense counsel telling her what the testimony's been during this trial.
Did you and Ross ever talk about going to a sandals resort?
We did. When we were planning the vacation to the Dominican, it was the travel agent that sent us the options. I believe sandals was one of them, or either it just came up in conversation regarding, places that we could go.
Okay. All right. Do you have any knowledge or recollection of whether or not you and Ross had engaged in starting to plan a family cruise with Ross's brother and sister-in-law?
It was something that Ross really wanted to do. It was something that he really wanted to make happen. It had been discussed when we would get together with his family. He would be like, okay, let's talk about this cruise. I really want to make this happen. What do we need to do to get this going? He wanted to have family vacations with his family as well, not just the 3 of us, but his family as well. I think his recollection of family vacations as a child, he doesn't have very many, and he wanted that to be different for Cooper. He wanted him to, remember, us going places together as a family.
Okay. Such as Fort Walton Beach?
Right.
All right. And the cruise in particular, you said this was something that Ross really wanted. Do you have any recollection of whether this was something that y'all had discussed with your brother and sister-in-law?
We did. Like if we were visiting them, it might have been something that he would have brought up. And a cruise, I think, was something that they have a family of 6, 2 adults and 4 kids.
And just so the jury will know, let's tell them who it is we're talking about. Who is Ross's brother?
Michael Bajans.
And Michael's wife is?
Amy Bajans.
And they have?
They have 4 kids.
All right. And y'all ended up being with them at Fort Walton Beach a couple of weeks before Cooper's death.
Yes.
Do you remember if y'all discussed during that trip, discussed the planning a cruise?
I don't remember when it was discussed.
All right. Do you know or have any knowledge whether or not Ross talked to a travel agent about starting to look into whether or not a cruise was something y'all could do?
I don't remember if we talked about that.
Okay.
There's just so much some details that I've just lost.
Okay. All right. Do you know who Heather Coyle is?
Yes.
Who is she?
She's a friend of ours first. She was in a small group that we were in, and she's also a travel agent.
And again, the small group, that's kind of like a Sunday school class?
Yes.
Except maybe you meet, not necessarily Sunday mornings?
Yeah, we would meet one weeknight.
Do you have any recollection if Ross had talked to Ms. Coyle about trying to start planning a cruise?
I don't.
Who was the primary one in your relationship that was sort of in the lead of getting this together and planning a cruise?
For that specific thing, it was Ross. It was something that he wanted to do. It was something that he wanted to make happen. So he was trying to coordinate, how it could be possible for all of us to do that. Trying to think of the most cost-effective ways to do it, because knowing that his brother had a family of 6, we were trying to make sure that it was something that was affordable for everybody. And I think that's why we landed on a cruise. Cruises tend to be not as expensive as flying somewhere and staying on.
Get more bang for your buck.
Right.
I want to talk to you about some things involving Little Aprons. Do you recall that there was a time when you and Ross would take pictures of Cooper when y'all dropped him off at Little Aprons?
Yes.
All right, tell us about that.
As a new mom, I was having him taken somewhere for the day was hard for me. I wanted to be involved, and I wanted to know that he was happy when he got there. First and foremost, I wanted to know that he got there safely. And so it was just kind of something that we settled on in the beginning, because Ross knew I was so nervous about it in the beginning, to take pictures and send them to me. And then I would know, okay, if he's smiling, he's happy. If he's eating, he's happy. If he's playing, he's happy. He's okay.
And was that a regular thing?
It was, but it once he went into the toddler room, I think that I had dropped him off one morning, and I realized just how he was doing in the mornings. It wasn't at breakfast time, so we weren't sitting down to eat. It was before breakfast. It was probably around 7:30 or so, and he just went in the room and just went, straight to something and playing, moving around, and I couldn't get a clear shot of him. And I think that I had a conversation with Ross at that point, saying, I understand, he's moving around more. If you're not able to get a clear shot, it's okay. You don't have to send them to me every day.
Okay. And did I ask you to look back at your messaging, look back at your phone, and try to recall sort of time frame when this might have occurred?
Yes. I think when looking back at my text, the last morning daycare picture that I got was in March of 2014.
Okay. And would that coincide roughly, to the best of your knowledge, with kind of when y'all may have had this conversation?
Possibly. I don't know when we had the conversation.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been admitted into evidence since the pendency exhibit 70. It's a two-page document. The first one is a photograph. See if you remember that.
I do. He sent it to me, I think it was the week before everything happened. He went to see Cooper at lunchtime, and it was around the time that they would be put down for a nap. They would eat lunch, and they would have their naps. And think that the text said something along the lines of, "Mommy, Daddy helped me go to sleep, helped me get to sleep." And I just noticed in this picture, you can see on the front spot. I'm sorry.
To the best of your knowledge, is this the last text that Ross ever sent to you of Cooper at Little Lakes?
I think so.
Leanna, I've talked to you on a couple occasions about whether or not Cooper was the kind of little boy that was wired to fall asleep easy or difficult to get down. So we've had some conversations about that. Do you remember that?
Yes.
All right. I want to talk to you first of all about when Cooper would be put in a car seat. Do you remember us having some conversations about that?
Yes.
Okay. And
he was very used to traveling. We would go back to Alabama at least once a month. He would go with me on most occasions. He was very used to being in the car, very used to traveling, very used to being in his car seat. It was comfortable for him. As far as him going to sleep, if Cooper was ready to go to sleep, he was going to go to sleep. It wasn't difficult to put him down at night. He was very much okay with, laying, we would put him in his bed and he'd just lay down and fall asleep. Not every single night, but most nights. But because I think he was so used to traveling that his car seat, he could fall asleep in it as well. On the way home from daycare, on the way home from church, it wouldn't be unusual to get home, just to say, for example, church, to get home and he'd still be asleep. Because I can remember thinking, I want to make it home before he falls asleep so I can put him down for his nap in his bed. But he would rarely make it home.
what about mealtime after he'd had food in his belly?
He would start falling asleep. And in fact, one of the first few times that it happened, I can remember texting one of the daycare teachers and saying, "Is this normal? Does he do this at daycare? Because he's basically falling asleep with grilled cheese in his mouth." And she said, "Oh yeah, he does that. He's passing out by the time lunchtime's over with."
I want to talk to you about whether or not you have any recollection of you and Ross discussing the purchase of a home, purchase of a house.
Yes.
All right. Well, first of all, did you have a real estate agent?
Did what?
Did you have a real estate agent?
Yes, we did.
And who was that?
Roger Webb.
All right. So do you have any?
I was just going to say, when we moved over to Marietta, we were renting a condo, and he was who we rented it from. He had it listed as the real estate agent. It wasn't his property, but he had it listed. And so when we were starting to talk about the home buying process, we wanted it to be with somebody that we had already made a connection with, and so we wanted to go back to him.
Okay. You were living in a condo,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb had helped y'all get into that lease.
Right.
So when it came time to start looking for a house, he was the guy.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
It is.
All right. All right. Tell us a little bit about that whole paradigm of how y'all came to decide it was time to start looking for a house, and sort of what your criteria were.
We knew that we wanted to move before Cooper started school. We wanted to get into the right school district for him. That was important to Ross. He officiated football, so he saw a lot of different schools doing that in the area, and he had an idea in his head of which ones were best. That was kind of his deal, and I was letting him handle that because he knew better than I did because of what he had done with the officiating. And we wanted to be in the home long enough to be settled before, Cooper were to start kindergarten. So that was a goal of ours to find something and move in and be there for a little while before Cooper actually wanted to start kindergarten in whatever school district we moved into. But I didn't really think that we were ready to buy a house. We didn't have the down payment. We had purchased a home in the past and had to move within 5 years, and it was a dicey situation at the time. We were able to move out of the home, but it was kind of scary, to sell a home with the market the way it was. And so I wasn't quite ready to put my foot down and decide on a house at that moment. I felt like we needed some things to kind of line up. I felt like we needed to have a little more income. I felt like we needed to make a little bit more, have a little bit more in savings to be prepared for that. And that was kind of the way that me and Ross complemented each other. There would be, things that he would be ready to do, and I may not be quite ready. And so I, pulled him back a little bit. Let's wait a little bit. Let's think about this. Let's take our time. Let's not jump and buy a house before we're ready.
Okay. So you're telling us you weren't ready. You didn't think it was time to buy a house.
That's right.
Do you know what Ross's position on that issue was?
He wanted to buy a house. I mean, we both wanted to buy a house, but he was in charge of that. I mean, he was the one contacting the real estate agent, setting up the meetings. I think we had one meeting with him. He was doing that.
All right. And you said that Ross had been a football referee?
Right.
All right. And so your understanding or your belief was he had a better knowledge of which school districts might be good school districts because he had been reffing football games in the area.
Right.
All right. Were there any other criteria that y'all talked about other than being in a good school district?
We wanted to make sure that it was a home that we could, because we've had that experience of purchasing and selling a home before, we wanted to make sure that we bought a house that was something that would be big enough for us in the future. Cooper wasn't going to be our only child. We were planning on having more children, and so we wanted to have space to, we lived out of town. Our families lived in Alabama. We wanted to have space for them to come and stay comfortably and also raise our family.
And these are things that y'all discussed?
Yes.
You talked to us just a little bit about your knowledge of child deaths in cars. And you referred to it as an irrational fear. But what I want to ask you is, did you ever do any research into that subject?
I did.
Did you ever tell police that you had done research into child deaths in cars?
I did not.
But did you have or do research into car seats?
I did. A lot.
I want you to tell the jury about the kind of research you did into car seats and what you discovered.
We were getting ready to move Cooper to a forward-facing car seat. We had already purchased it and had been using it some. But I did research throughout his life about seat belts and safety and, where the straps need to be, how tight they need to be.
Let me stop you. I'm sorry. Let's start back then. The first car seat you had, do you remember which one that was?
It was the Key Fit 30. And really, when we left the hospital with Cooper, we had a nurse that stopped us on the way out and said the straps are not tight enough. You need to make them tighter, because if you don't, then it can be dangerous dangerous, if there's a car accident. And so she showed us how to do that. And so because, that happened, we're new parents, we're thinking, okay, we need to know more about this. We both did research into that car seat and where the straps needed to be, how tight they needed to be, where the chest clip needed to be, the safest place for it to be, for if there were an accident. And so it started with that car seat. And we were very comfortable with that car seat. And when it came time to buy a new one, because we knew that he was going to need another seat very soon, I was the one doing the research on that. I watched video after video of car seat reviews and why this one is good. And the one that we ended up getting was one that could be seated rear-facing and forward-facing. And it was something that they could grow into. I want to say you could have used it on up, 4 or 5 years old. It was a very intentional purchase. It was.
All right. Just so there's no confusion, what you were just talking to us about, the last one you said you did research on, that's not the Key Fit 30.
No.
Right. That's actually a forward-facing car seat.
It is.
Okay. All right. And I may get into that with you in a few minutes, but I want to talk to you specifically about the Key Fit 30. And am I saying that correctly? Is that the name of it?
It's the model, I think.
Okay.
Kiko's the brand.
Kiko. Okay. What was your understanding of how long he was supposed to stay in a rear-facing car seat?
His pediatrician, that was one of the questions that he always asked when we went to the doctor. Is he still rear-facing? It's recommended that you keep all children rear-facing until they're 2 years of age.
Okay. And Cooper would have been 2 in August of 2014.
I knew that Cooper was well within the weight limit of the Key Fit 30. He fit in the seat. He was not uncomfortable. There was no problems with it. He had not outgrown the seat. I'd even had friends make comments to me. I can't believe that he's still small enough to fit in that car seat because of his age.
All right. Well, let's explore that just a little bit. For 22 months, do you know if Cooper was big for his age, small for his age, or where he fit on the spectrum?
He was small. He was always small. From the moment he was born, he kept a very steady pace of growth on somewhere between 5. It was always under 10%. Height, weight, everything was on the bottom of the scale. And of course, it was something that we talked to his pediatrician about. And he says, listen, as long as he stayed on his growth pattern, that's normal for him. The fact that he is, he's 10% and maybe the next kid I see is going to be 90%, that doesn't matter. What we're going to be looking at is if he just stops growing, like if he doesn't continue on his steady pace. And it was just very steady. And he stayed on his own little line, somewhere between 5 and 10%, wherever it was.
And when you and I talked about this before to try to explain to me how petite he was for his age, do you remember discussing what pant size he was wearing?
A lot of the clothes that he was wearing it was summer, so shorts, 6 to 12 month pants. He could possibly be wearing, all sizes, brands of clothes, they range in sizes, we know that. He might be wearing a 6-month pair of shorts and a 18-month t-shirt. But very rarely could he fit in any 18-month pants. The 18-month pants that I did have him in, I had to actually take up the waist and sew them in so that he could wear them.
Do you know what the weight limit was for that Key Fit 30 car seat?
It was 30 pounds.
Hence the 30.
Right.
And do you know what Cooper weighed?
I think he was around 22 pounds, 23. Maybe the last doctor's visit, maybe that's why I remember that. I really.
I'm going to show you. Those been marked as Penn's exhibits 172, 173, 174. Take a look at those, please. Leanna, do you know what you're looking at?
Yes, they're pictures of Cooper in the Key Fit 30.
Okay. And you know when those were taken?
These were taken by my mom during a visit to Marietta. She came to us, and I want to say it was around, I think the timestamp was around April
April 20th of what year?
2014.
Okay. And do those truly and accurately reflect or represent how Cooper looked in that car seat on April the 20th of 2014?
I mean, it's him in the car seat, so yes,
Okay.
very accurate.
All right. I'm going to move 172, 173, 174.
Just have a few questions while you're on that, Judge. Ma'am, do you know what car that car seat was in? Those pictures were taken?
It's, you can see some of the car in the picture. Based on the steering wheel, I would think that it was the Hyundai Tucson.
You can't say, looking at those photographs, which car it was, correct, for sure?
No,
Okay. And those were taken by your mom, correct?
they weren't.
Okay. And as far as you think it was April 20th, is that, you looked at those recently, so that's how you know that, or for some other reason?
No, that's because I've looked at them recently and seen the timestamp on them.
And did you provide those from a camera or something like that, or where did those pictures come from?
They came from my mother.
Okay, so basically your mother, we don't know exactly how her, I guess, you can't testify as to when or how those photographs were actually taken. It's going to depend on her, I guess, camera or computer or wherever those came from.
I know that I was with her when the pictures were taken.
Okay.
Because I was with her that weekend.
Okay, so it was that same weekend, and you think these were that same weekend?
Yes, I do.
And was this just one of the trips that you took with Cooper?
This was a visit that my mom came to us. She
Okay,
came to
you're
Marietta.
right. So it was in Marietta.
Yes.
Okay. And did your mom also have a car seat base as well?
She did not.
Okay, so she didn't. How would Cooper travel when he was over there with her, or when he would travel with her?
It only happened on one occasion, maybe one or two occasions, and I took a base with me. I took the second base with me, installed it in her car, and she was able to use the car seat.
Okay, thank you. No objection, Judge.
Admitted.
Okay. And what we're looking at here, we're testifying that your mom took these with her, and that this is how Cooper looked on that day.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to show you, could Judge focus these two here, and we'll show them 173 and 174.
You can.
Leanna, did your son hit some enormous growth spurt after April the 20th of 2014?
No, he was very steady, like I mentioned before. He just, I never noticed a time where he shot up or out in any way. It was just very gradual, and like I said, on his own percentile of his own little personal growth chart. And there was never nothing that sticks out significantly.
That's a good point to put.
It's fine. Yes, ma'am.
You want to wrap something up?
No, it's fine. We can break.
You sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's recess for lunch. Ladies and gentlemen, close your notepads, take them with you, look at them on, have a conversation about this, enjoy your lunch.
Let's all rise for the jury.
Let's break to the one. Everyone have a good lunch.
You take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Step down.